Okay, for the advanced track, we are sewing the other type of hook, and this time I want you to use the loop end instead of a bar end. You're gonna prepare your fabric just like you did for the other fasteners, and we will begin with the hook side. So if you take a look at the hook, the opening is down here. It's actually kind of a backwards T from the skirt hook. So this time we wanna make sure, think of it this way, the opening needs to face the longer end. We're gonna place this about in the center with the opening going this way. The T is upside down for this one. You're gonna take your double threaded needle and you're gonna start around the side of the hole and take your stitches going around the loops. This is because we want this to be nice and secure. It looks nice, and I call it crowning because it kind of is like spikes of a crown. So I'm gonna take a stitch right here. We're gonna go around, and this time it's a little less about how many stitches you do and starting at the side and working your way towards the center. And however many stitches it takes you to get there is how many stitches it takes. So I'm holding it in place. Honestly, these hooks are a lot harder to hold. It's kind of annoying. We're just gonna stitch around just like we did with the other snaps and skirt hooks and bars. I'm gonna take one more stitch on this side of the loop. Okay, so you can see there are stitches encircling this loop. That came out a little messy. Weird. All right, we're gonna keep going. Whoops. Sorry about that. In and around. Go at least until I get to the side, because there is actually a tiny bit of a gap right here at the end of the loop, and so it doesn't really do us very much good to put a stitch right there. Okay, so now this is on pretty secure. However, this can flip up. So we need to stitch the hook down so that it stays flat. So the way we're gonna do that is I'm gonna go back in the fabric and jump to right beside the hook. Now this time, I'm gonna take my thread, instead of going over the hook like that, I'm gonna go under, so that as I take my stitches, I'm anchoring the end of the hook. So I'm gonna go right next to the edge of the hook. And I do actually find it to be a tiny bit easier to go in and out for this technique, so that my stitches are really close to the hook. You can't always do that on a garment, but it's nice if you can. So I go next to the hook, thread underneath, go back down, so the stitch anchors the hook. Back up, underneath, back down. You only need to do that about 3 or 4 times. I'm gonna put my knot on this side of my fabric because that's where my starting knot was. Okay. So once I get this knot tied, I'll show you how this helped anchor the hook, which makes it a much more reliable hook to use. Because if this end does not get anchored, the hook becomes really floppy, and it is very challenging, particularly for like a quick change or whatever, for a performer to get it to catch the way you want it to. So now you can see if I bend the fabric, it's staying in place. Okay, just like with the other fasteners, we want to do the loop on the opposite side. Before I do that, oh, there we go, opposite side like that. Before I do that, let me get some more thread. Okay, so we are going to keep the hook side up, fold one edge over, fold the hook on top of that edge, make sure everything is nice and lined up. And then we're going to do the same technique that we did with the other hook, where we're gonna mark on either side of the hook to see where our loop needs to land. And this time I'm gonna do a straight line next to the loop there. So this is where the loop needs to fall. And the loop needs to go this way so that when the hook comes around, because the hook comes in this way and catches like this. So I'm gonna put the very tip of the loop right on that line. And then you sew it like before. You've got a double threaded needle. We're gonna do the going around the loops like a crown method. I have seen students before accidentally stitch the loop down too much where the loop itself actually got stitched, so don't do that. Just go around these loops as I am demonstrating. Something for you advanced students to know is that hooks and loops and hooks and bars, this type, do come in a variety of sizes. And so you need to check before you sew anything on that they can hook into each other correctly, because they may or may not be the same size. I actually was a little concerned when I pulled this loop out of the drawer because it didn't look like it was the same size, but I tested it and it hooked just fine on the hook. So something to keep in mind as you sew. Now, once I have one side down, it's really easy for the loop to rotate still, so you want to make sure that it's still lined up with your marking before you stitch down that other loop, because that is the loop that's going to anchor it into the correct position. Okay, I'm just sewing around like a crown. I'm gonna take my knot. And then this will be ready to test to make sure it was sewn on correctly. Just like with all of the other fasteners, you need to triple check that the fasteners work the way you want them to. There's nothing quite as annoying as going into a fitting and realizing that the closure that has been sewn on was done wrong, and so you have to fix it with safety pins and after the fitting. Okay, so now we're going to loop this around just like a waistband, hook it on the loop, give it a tug. Yep, that works really well. So that is a regular hook and loop.